In late November of 2024, law enforcement in the Floridian city of Hallandale Beach responded to a shooting that took place at the Beach Club 2 Hallandale Luxury Condo Tower. The authorities received an alert through ShotSpotter, a gunfire detection program which had reported 5 shots in quick succession, followed by a 6th. Upon reaching the scene, officers found Sabrina Nikki, aged 27, and her 34-year-old husband, Tim, both dead on the balcony of their home. The woman was on her back after suffering a single gunshot wound, while her husband was lying face down following multiple shots to the chest. Aerial shots of the scene later revealed pools of blood and what appeared to be bullet holes in a glass door of the condo. Police footage taken at the scene showed the TV still blaring, as well as a teddy bear and a box of roses with a heart on it. Investigators determined that Sabrina had carried out the shooting. The couple were of Kosovar Albanian descent, and they had moved to Florida from New York in 2022. Jim was a successful day trader, while his wife, who also went by her maiden name of Zaferovic, had worked as a model. Sabrina was previously featured in a 2021 report by Inside Edition, in which she walked around Times Square to see how many men would catcall her if she was wearing a mask. At the time of the shooting, she no longer modeled and was a housewife. Jim's brother Arben believed that Sabrina opened fire because she came to a point of guilt or something that she just could not take. Arben revealed that Sabrina had previously admitted to her husband that she'd cheated on him. It led to tension between them, and neighbors reported that they heard the couple arguing on the balcony and inside the apartment in the weeks leading up to the shooting. Arben told a media outlet, "My brother wanted a divorce and she didn't take that lightly." Number 9. Britany Michelle Taylor. On the evening of May the 15th of 2022, Tennessee woman Britany Michelle Taylor was fighting with her husband Mike at their Bradley County home. The crux of the dispute was the woman telling her partner that he had to go to bed because he had to get up early the next day and go to work. The seemingly innocuous argument escalated to the point that Britany grabbed a gun from the bedroom while Mike was in the bathroom. She would tell the authorities that she was trying to get her husband's attention, angered by the fact that he kept telling her he didn't care. Britany, who was at the time in her mid-40s, opened fire in the hallway and shot into a closet door. The woman then went into the bathroom to confront Mike. She pointed the gun at him and pulled the trigger. Britany claimed that she thought the gun would just click, but her assessment of the situation was tragically mistaken. A bullet struck her husband in the cheek, killing him. Britany called 911 and was arrested. She subsequently admitted second-degree murder and in January of 2024 was sentenced to 17 years in prison. Number 8. Megan Valentine. Illinois 2nd Judicial Circuit Judge Michael Valentine was found dead outside his Albion home. On November the 5th of 2024, Michael was fatally shot by his wife, 44-year-old Megan, who was promptly taken into custody. The woman was charged with first-degree murder, aggravated battery with a firearm, aggravated discharge of a firearm, and aggravated domestic battery. Megan admitted to law enforcement that she had snapped. Her legal representative claimed that she acted in self-defense because Michael had been abusive towards her. Evansville news station WEVV reported that Megan had searched online for information about guns and articles about DNA on knives in the lead-up to the shooting. The prosecution argued that Megan was a danger to herself, her family, and the public. Michael was described as a good and fair judge who helped many he served, as well as a loving son and a loving father. An investigation was launched to determine the full circumstances surrounding the shooting, and Megan was set to appear in court in mid-December of 2024. Number 7. Nancy Crampton Brophy. On the morning of June the 2nd of 2018, Daniel Brophy left the home he shared with his wife, Nancy Crampton Brophy, and headed to the Oregon Culinary Institute in Portland, where he was a teacher. As he prepared for work, someone made their way into the institute and shot him twice, killing him. Students arrived and found 63-year-old Daniel dead in the kitchen. During the investigation that followed, suspicion fell upon Nancy, who gave law enforcement conflicting reports about her whereabouts at the time of the killing. She was arrested for murder a few months after the incident, and her trial, held in Multnomah County Circuit Court, began in April of 2022. Further attention fell on the case due to Nancy's literary pursuits. The self-published author's work included romance novels such as The Wrong Husband and The Wrong Lover, as well as a 2011 online essay titled How to Murder Your Husband. Nancy wrote at the time, "The thing I know about murder is that every one of us have it in him or her when pushed far enough." Adding, "If the murder is supposed to set me free, I certainly don't want to spend any time in jail." In the essay, she listed several ways of committing matricide, such as with a knife, gun, poison, or by hiring a hitman. The conspicuously titled essay was not allowed to be presented as evidence at her trial, given the fact that it had been done years prior as part of a writing seminar. In her initial police interviews, Nancy claimed that she'd walked the family dog and had a shower on the morning of June the 2nd. However, traffic camera footage discovered in 2020 showed her driving to and from the institute during the 13-minute window that Daniel had been shot. Confronted with the evidence, Nancy changed her story to say that she'd likely been on a coffee run, claiming that the stress of the day's events had left her with a memory hole. She dismissed her presence at the scene as a coincidence. Ballistics indicated that Daniel had been shot with a Glock pistol. The weapon was never found, but Nancy owned a gun of the same make and model. The woman contended that the purchase had been made with Daniel supporting that she'd given him the gun so that he could protect himself when he went mushroom picking. She also bought a Glock slide and a barrel from eBay, but claimed it was part of her research into a new book. The prosecution argued that she'd purchased the parts, swapped them out on the gun she used to kill her husband, and then discarded them. Aside from the circumstantial evidence linking her to her husband's murder, the prosecution also had a clear motive. The couple had been experiencing financial difficulties, and Nancy stood to make a total of $1.4 million from Daniel's life insurance policies, in addition to becoming the sole owner of their $300,000 home. Nancy was convicted of second-degree murder on May the 25th of 2022. After less than 2 days of jury deliberations. The following month, she was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 25 years before she'd be eligible for parole. Nancy showed little emotion upon receiving her punishment. Daniel's son from a previous marriage addressed her in court saying, "You opted to lie, cheat, steal, defraud, and ultimately kill the man that was your biggest fan. You were to borrow from your catalog the wrong wife." Number 6. Mary Harrison. In early June of 2018, Texas woman Mary Harrison gunned down her husband for beating the family cat at their North Dallas home. The shooting occurred after the pet, named Smokey, had gone missing, and 47-year-old Mary plastered the neighborhood with signs pleading for its return. After Smokey was found, Mary and her husband, 49-year-old Dexter, got into a heated argument over him attacking the feline. During the row, Mary grabbed a pistol and shot Dexter. He succumbed to his injuries at Presbyterian Hospital, and Mary, who admitted to pulling the trigger, was arrested for murder. Smokey had suffered broken ribs and a broken jaw, but survived the beating and received treatment. Reacting to the incident, a neighbor told a local media outlet, "It's kind of crazy. It's unbelievable. A man loses his life over a cat. I mean, people love their pets, but it ain't that serious to die for a cat." Number 5. Mary Lou Wigglesworth. On Christmas Day 2022, New Jersey woman Mary Lou Wigglesworth shot and killed her husband, 57-year-old David, at the home they shared in May Landing. Mary Lou, who was in her early 50s at the time, was arrested, and she readily admitted to pulling the trigger. She maintained, however, that she'd acted in self-defense while fearing for her life. Mary Lou told the police that her husband had assaulted her on the night in question. Following a heated argument, David allegedly threatened her with a handgun that he kept in the bedroom. Immediately after being threatened, Mary Lou grabbed the pistol and shot him dead. Officers who attended the scene were reported to have documented bruising throughout the woman's body, but that information was allegedly not shared with Mary Lou's defense. She was charged with first-degree murder, with prosecutors arguing that she shot her husband in cold blood while he was lying naked in bed and with the TV on. Due to the severity of the allegations, Mary was twice denied bail during the legal proceedings that followed, and ended up spending nearly 1 year and 8 months behind bars while her case was ongoing. Processing photos showed a dramatic change in her appearance following her time in custody, with later photos showing her gaunt and bearing a sullen expression. As evidence emerged confirming that there had been an altercation in the home, Mary was offered a plea deal for second-degree manslaughter. She didn't want to risk going to trial on the murder charge and took the deal. In the summer of 2024, she was handed a 6-year sentence. Number 4. Hannahgret Donnelly. 55-year-old midwife Hannahgret Donnelly was jailed for life with a minimum of 16 years behind bars in the spring of 2019 after she was found guilty of tormenting and killing her husband, Christopher. On March the 31st of the previous year, Hannahgret called law enforcement from an address in Aylesbury, Buckinghamshire, to report that her husband was unresponsive. 55-year-old Christopher was found dead on the bathroom floor of their home. His body was riddled with injuries, old and new. German-born Hannahgret admitted that she'd repeatedly hit him in the head with a rolling pin the previous day, but contended that his death was unexpected and that she hoped he would have regained his senses.
As I said, he never, it wasn't that he sort of fell over and lost consciousness. So I punched him on his nose severely because I was so angry with him, but he didn't have such a big cut. He had just a small cut.
Do you feel that hitting him over the head with a rolling pin, with a hairbrush, using your hands and fist, is a appropriate reaction to him acting in that way, being in his strange moods?
It's more like this, helping him to come out of some sort of peculiar trance. No, I can't say it's a trance, but it's sort of peculiar.
Does that mean he's fallen down pretty much the whole flight of stairs?
No. As I said, he walked a bit faster then. So I pushed him on the back, and he walked a bit faster then, and then he tripped over and fell, and he fell against the crate. There was a crate, and the crate got broken, and then he cut himself in the head.
The man, a former music teacher, and Hannahgret had been married for 23 years. They lived an isolated existence with their children aged 14 to 21, who were homeschooled by their mother. The family had at one point lived more conventionally, but over the years withdrew from the world and shunned modern technology, including cell phones. For at least 2 years, Hannahgret was horrifically abusive towards her husband, and her violent behavior initially paralleled but then contributed to his degrading health. Her campaign of torment involved routinely punching him or hitting him with household items and ruthless punishments such as not allowing him to go to the bathroom. Christopher had become disabled by January of 2023, and he suffered from bronchial pneumonia at the time of his murder. Before ending her husband's life, Hannahgret's systematic abuse had severely weakened the man. During questioning, the woman calmly told detectives that she would use violence against her husband as a sort of reset, meant to help him get out of trance-like states. Hannahgret also confessed that she would hit her husband whenever he talked about a subject she didn't like, acted disinterested, or looked at her the wrong way. She admitted to rage-fueled incidents that included pushing Christopher down a flight of stairs or severely punching him in the nose. Recounting the day of the murder, Hannahgret told law enforcement, "We had a chase around the table in a more light-hearted sort of way. I tried to sort things out with him in a bantering sort of way."
Sorry, when you say
chase around the kitchen table, it's in a more sort of light-hearted way. And
how did that end up with you hitting him?
I don't know. It was just feeling.
She went on to say, "If I hit you with a rolling pin, maybe you come out of your trance." But then it did get, I did hit him a bit harder sometimes. Investigators discovered Christopher's blood on furniture, walls and ceilings throughout their house. Due to the repeated beatings, at least 78 separate injuries were found on Christopher's body, including cauliflower ear, fractures to his spine, neck and shoulder, as well as fractures to the cartilage in his voice box and wounds all over his head. Number 3. Constance Seinwill. In late September of 2024, Constance Seinwill frantically knocked on a neighbor's door in the San Antonio suburb of Universal City. The 61-year-old, who was in a state of intoxication, told them that she may have killed her husband, Ronald. Law enforcement arrived at the scene, and after they found Ronald dead, took Constance into custody. According to Police Chief Johnny Siemens, the woman confessed during a 4-hour interview that she'd struck Ronald in a fit of rage and that she continued to batter him after he had fallen to the floor. Constance said that she was angry because Ronald had hidden her Xanax pills from her. The woman couldn't remember what she'd used to attack her husband, but officers found a number of items in the home which could have served as the murder weapon. Neighbors reported that the couple fought all the time. The couple's daughter told the police that 63-year-old Ronald had been sober for 23 years, but that Constance still struggled with addiction and anxiety, leading to frequent conflicts in the household. Constance was charged with her husband's murder and, as of the latest updates on the matter, remained in custody. Today's topic was requested by JVL171, Baseball 1942 and Bakerman42. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Number 2. Nermeen Naufi. 62-year-old Mamdouh Naufi disappeared in May of 2023. Shortly after returning to his home in the Greenacre suburb of Sydney, Australia, the man shared the residence with his wife, 52-year-old Nermeen, with whom he'd moved from Egypt over 3 decades prior. An investigation was launched in July after other family members reported Mamdouh missing. Nermeen, with whom the man shared 8 adult children, was interviewed and offered various versions of his whereabouts, but none could be confirmed. In one of her reports, she claimed that he traveled to visit family in Egypt, but no one was able to reach him. Homicide detectives took over the investigation in January of 2024 after the circumstances of Mamdouh's disappearance were deemed suspicious. Detectives found that parts of the couple's Greenacre home had been refloored and that the property had undergone significant cleanup in the aftermath of a violent incident. The investigation revealed that on the day Mamdouh went missing, he'd given his wife control over his properties in Egypt. Detectives determined that Nermeen had been waiting to get out of the relationship and that being given authority over her husband's estate became the perfect opportunity. Mamdouh was reported to have been an abusive husband, and law enforcement had responded to incidents of domestic violence at the Greenacre home in 2008 and 2009. In one of those cases, Nermeen was reportedly observed exhibiting minor injuries, but no charges were pressed. The investigation concluded that Nermeen killed her husband in May of 2023. She then allegedly dismembered him, placed his remains in 20 to 30 bags and disposed of them in various rubbish bins across Sydney's southwest. After doing so, continued using her husband's phone and social media to maintain the illusion that he was still alive. Mamdouh's body was never found and his manner of death remained a mystery. The use of this phone stopped when Nermeen traveled to Egypt to act upon the power of attorney and sell his properties before returning to Australia with $200,000. Nermeen was arrested in early October of 2024 at a psychiatric facility in Bankstown, which she'd attended after reportedly hearing the voices of angels. While there, she was diagnosed with a depressive illness, PTSD, and a possible psychotic illness. She was charged with her husband's murder and was set to make a court appearance in mid-December of 2024. If this episode didn't make you paranoid enough already, then stick around after number 1 for our release about when daughters go wrong. Turns out you can't trust them either. Number 1. Kelly Cochran. In October of 2014, military veteran Christopher Regan, aged 51, was reported missing after he failed to show up for work in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. As they looked into the case, the police learned that he'd been having an affair with his married co-worker Kelly Cochran. Iron River Police Chief Laura Frizzo led the investigation and made contact with Kelly, who was at the time in her mid-30s, and her husband Jason. Frizzo suspected that Jason had played a part in Christopher's disappearance, and a subsequent search of the couple's home found blood splatter on the ceiling and broken door frames, but there wasn't enough evidence for an immediate arrest. The case of Christopher's disappearance went cold. Kelly and Jason left Michigan and returned to their hometown of Hobart, Indiana, where they'd grown up together as next-door neighbors. Frizzo continued investigating the case and concentrated her department's attention on a body of water known as the Caspian Pit, near the address where the Cochrans had lived. Just offshore, law enforcement found a burn barrel with a clothesline and a cement block attached to weigh it down. Frizzo believed that it had belonged to the Cochrans, but it was found to be empty. The case would only get more complicated from that point further. Back in Indiana, on February the 20th of 2016, Kelly called 911 to report that her husband had stopped breathing. Jason was pronounced dead, and it was initially suspected that he'd succumbed to a heroin overdose. However, an autopsy would reveal that he'd been asphyxiated. The FBI then received an anonymous tip that the Cochrans were connected to Christopher's disappearance in Michigan. Hobart Police Detective Jeremy Ogden began investigating Jason's death and consulted with Chief Frizzo. Their exchanges led to Ogden focusing his attention on Kelly, but she revealed little of substance during their interviews. The detective carried out surveillance on her and noticed that she frequently visited a park and sat by a specific tree. Ogden decided he would employ a psychological tactic to scare Kelly into talking. He went to the location and carved out Chris's hair on a tree stump in a bid to convince Kelly that her former lover was trying to reach out to her from beyond the grave. The trick worked, as shortly thereafter Kelly contacted the detective saying they needed to talk. For the first time, she admitted that Christopher had been murdered but tried to pin the blame entirely on Jason. She claimed that he'd shot Christopher in the head out of jealousy before forcing her to remove the bullet from the victim's skull and to dismember the body. Kelly subsequently fled to Kentucky, but U.S. Marshals tracked her down and arrested her. The woman eventually offered a full confession. On their wedding night, she and Jason had reportedly made a pact to kill anyone involved in their extramarital affairs. Leading up to the fall of 2014, Jason found out that Kelly had cheated on him with Christopher, and the married couple decided to act upon their murderous arrangement. In October of 2014, Kelly lured her lover to her home with the promise of intercourse. Jason ambushed him, shot him dead, and they dismembered him together. Neighbors would report that the couple hosted a big barbecue shortly after they'd been heard using power tools in the middle of the night. Lots of meat was served, and some of the attendees said that they ate strange tasting burgers. Once the couple's crimes came to light, it was suspected that they fed cooked human remains, possibly Christopher's, to their guests. Frizzo highlighted that it was a theory that the neighbors had developed independently from police findings. Kelly led law enforcement to a wooded area where they found parts of the rifle that had been used to murder Christopher, along with a .22 caliber bullet and human remains, including a skull that featured a bullet hole. Kelly also admitted that she injected Jason with heroin before climbing into his lab and choking him to death. The woman claimed to have done so in revenge for her husband killing Christopher, whom she described as the only good thing in her life. Kelly maintained that Jason was primarily responsible for her lover's death, and she went to trial. The Devil Woman of Michigan, as Kelly came to be known, was found guilty and jailed for life without parole for Christopher's murder. Many, including Frizzo and Kelly's own family, feared that she had claimed many more victims and buried them throughout the Midwest. Kelly's brother suspected that aside from her husband and lover, she killed at least 9 other people. Kelly eventually pleaded guilty to killing her husband under a deal that saw her being sentenced to 65 years in prison. In 2018, as part of her deal, Kelly would be immune from prosecution in Indiana for any additional murders, meaning that she'd face no punishment upon revealing the location of any more victims. Number 7. Britany Simpson. On April the 1st of 2019, Britany Simpson was sentenced to 18 years in prison for murdering her father after he'd evicted her. The 31-year-old had been living rent-free at her parents' home in Mount Pleasant, South Carolina, up until May of 2017, when they demanded she find residence elsewhere. In previous years, Simpson had reportedly helped pay for expenses, but her increasingly erratic behavior was a source of concern for her senior citizen parents. 5 days after her abrupt eviction, the woman snuck into the family home through the back door and fatally shot her father, Robert Simpson, who was 66 at the time. Following the shooting, Simpson allegedly changed clothes and put all evidence of the crime in a backpack, which she then threw into a creek nearby. This wasn't the first instance of violence in the Simpson household. More than 50 911 calls were made from the residence between 2007 and the time of the murder. Simpson had reportedly been diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and her mental health issues began to make her behavior unpredictable. Facing a potential 30-year prison sentence, Simpson ultimately agreed to a deal with the prosecution, entering an Alford plea to voluntary manslaughter, which indicated that she refused to admit guilt but acknowledged that there was enough evidence to be convicted at trial. Number 6. Odessa Kry. 73-year-old Odessa Kry was murdered on April the 7th of 2019 by her daughter, who shared her name. The 36-year-old Kry was not subjected to a regular court case in the aftermath, but instead faced what is known in the UK as trial of the facts. In such procedures, when the defendant is determined to have a mental condition that renders them unable to understand the consequences of their actions, jurors aren't expected to deliver a verdict of guilty or innocent. Instead, they are asked to choose between discharge, supervision order, or hospitalization. Kry reportedly suffered from a treatment-resistant type of schizophrenia and had, following her incarceration, asked relatives about her mother's whereabouts, despite having killed the woman herself. The victim's body was discovered by police officers at her Northumberland, England residence. Her abdomen had been sliced open and her head was missing. Several tools used during the murder were found in the bathtub, including scissors, knives, and a mallet. A family friend testified that Kry the Younger had arrived at their house carrying a bag containing the victim's head and that she'd kissed it before hiding it under the sink. The witness didn't call police that day, claiming to have had no access to a phone. Instead, they visited a pub and confided in a friend, who contacted authorities the following day. Following Carey's trial of the facts, the jury determined that she had, without a shadow of a doubt, murdered her mother. The troubled woman was consequently sent to a secure psychiatric facility for treatment, as well as to ensure the safety of the general public. Number 5. Rachel Scarlet Mullenix. On September the 13th of 2006, Rachel Mullenix used a pair of knives to fatally stab her mother, Barbara Ann, over 50 times. The victim's mutilated body was discovered at her home in Newport Harbor, California. She was reportedly 56 years of age when her daughter brutally attacked her with the help of 23-year-old Ian Wesley Allen, her boyfriend. The incident had allegedly been sparked by an argument regarding Rachel breaking curfew. The two perpetrators fled the state in the aftermath before being apprehended by the police in Louisiana 2 days later. During the ensuing trial, prosecutors showed evidence that depicted the visceral brutality of the attack, including the killer's decision to use a butter knife to pierce the victim's eye. Rachel admitted to conspiracy to commit murder, as well as covering up the crime, but attempted to shift the brunt of the blame towards Allen, claiming he was the only one who carried out the fatal assault itself. Her father testified on her behalf, claiming that his ex-wife had been an angry drunk and that he believed his daughter's claims of innocence. Nevertheless, on October the 9th of 2008, Rachel was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. Her boyfriend received the same sentence 1 month later. Number 4. Cheyenne Jessie. Florida woman Cheyenne Jessie murdered her 50-year-old father, Mark Weakley, as well as her daughter Meredith, before placing their remains in plastic bags and hiding them in a neighbor's shed. The victims had last been seen on July the 18th of 2008, but 25-year-old Cheyenne reported them missing a week later, claiming that her father had kidnapped Meredith and run off to Georgia. Police were suspicious of the young woman from the start of their investigation, immediately noting several holes in her story. She reportedly claimed that her father had told her about his plan via text, explaining that he only had a year to live and wanted to spend it with his granddaughter. Cheyenne's cover-up story failed to hold over the authorities for long, as investigators discovered the victims' corpses after noticing a potent stench in the area where they'd been hidden. Both bodies had sustained 3 gunshot wounds and over 12 lacerations, inflicted by a sharp-edged implement. When confronted with the evidence, Cheyenne admitted to having murdered her daughter because she was getting in the way of a new relationship. Weakley had reportedly attempted to intervene on his granddaughter's behalf, but was then slain himself. Cheyenne's boyfriend testified that she'd asked him how long bodies would take to decompose. Although he claimed not to have suspected any wrongdoing on her part at the time, Cheyenne was found guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder on July the 17th of 2019 and was consequently sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Number 3. Jessica Hannon. On July the 16th of 2021, Jessica Hannon unleashed a brutal attack on her mother, Michelle, while intoxicated. The incident occurred during 49-year-old Michelle's engagement party in the town of Risca, Wales. In the preceding moments, Jessica's boyfriend had been asked to leave the family gathering after allegedly causing a commotion. Furious, 28-year-old Jessica proceeded to shove her mother onto the kitchen floor, kicking and punching the bride-to-be. Michelle managed to escape the room, but her daughter quickly pursued her before throwing 2 bottles of champagne at the window. The glass shards struck Michelle in the face, causing a 2-inch V-shaped laceration to the cheek, which required stitches to mend. The victim testified during her daughter's eventual trial, revealing that she'd been left permanently scarred by the attack and had lost sensation in her face in the aftermath. Jessica pleaded guilty to a charge of wounding and was sentenced by Judge Nicholas Parry to a suspended 8-month jail sentence. She was ordered to attend a 15-day rehabilitation program, as well as refrain from consuming alcohol for 90 days. Judge Parry also granted Michelle a 3-year restraining order against her pugnacious daughter. Number 2. Sonia Whitten. After repeatedly stabbing her 77-year-old father, Jeffrey, Englishwoman Sonia Whitten was sentenced to 10 years in prison plus 4 years of supervised release. The grisly attack took place on November the 8th of 2015, when 47-year-old Whitten arrived at her father's burnt-wood home wearing a balaclava and carrying a knife. She immediately began stabbing the man in front of his grandson, while allegedly screaming, "Die, die, die." Although he sustained severe wounds to the torso, neck and arms, Jeffrey miraculously survived the assault after being rushed to the hospital, where he underwent emergency surgery. He'd reportedly been stabbed 22 times and would remain in intensive care for 12 days before being released. During the case's subsequent trial, the victim testified that he hadn't been aware of the assailant's identity until she spoke, saying, "It was only then that I thought to myself, oh my God, it's my daughter." Sonia's defense attorney, Christopher Clark, attempted to mitigate the extent of his client's culpability, claiming that she'd been under the influence of illegal substances at the time and that she'd tried to take her own life after the attack. The woman ultimately agreed to a plea deal with prosecutors to avoid receiving a harsher sentence. Number 1. Sofia Negroponte. Sofia Negroponte was accused of fatally stabbing a man in her Rockville, Maryland apartment on February the 13th of 2020. The woman was one of the 5 adopted children of former U.S. Ambassador to the UN, John Negroponte, who also served as Secretary of State to George W. Bush. Sofia, who was 27 at the time of the incident, had gotten into an argument with former schoolmate Yusuf Rasmussen, aged 24. The disagreement escalated to the extent that Sofia brandished a knife, which she used to stab the victim in the neck, killing him instantly. She allegedly apologized as she lay on top of his body and made no attempts to flee the scene. The young woman was charged with first-degree murder, but her father spoke to the judge on her behalf, claiming she had a history of substance abuse. The former government official promised the court that he'd ensure his daughter stayed out of trouble if she was released under his care. However, she was remanded into custody without bail. Sofia's trial date was delayed due to COVID restrictions, and the case's first hearing was rescheduled to December of 2022. Thanks for watching. Would you rather meet the love of your life knowing that they'll die in a year or never meet them? Let us know in the comments section below.